I just wanted to get on here and bring you a very short lesson about foreground, middle ground, and background. This knowledge helps you create depth in your artwork. So there are some tricks to foreground, and I've exaggerated some of them a little bit in this just to make it more clear on how it works. So if you will note, I have used trees to illustrate foreground, middle ground, and background, and a little bit of color too. So let's start with the foreground. You can see that this is my tree in the foreground, right? It starts at the bottom of my page. It is larger than any of the other trees on the page. It runs the whole length of the page. And you notice that the top of the tree is not there. So it is a really large tree. When you are close to something, it is much larger than when you are further away from it. It appears smaller. So as an artist, that's what you're trying to do, is show the things that are further away smaller, because when we look at them, that's how they look. So here's my foreground. My tree is pretty good size. I move to the middle ground. Notice that my tree is about half or a little less size as the one in the foreground, the width of it. It is also shorter. I brought it up about 2.5 inches on the picture plane. So that also creates the illusion of it being behind it, right? So another way that you can do help create depth is you can overlap. You can see that this tree is behind this tree because you can't see the leaves on through the tree. So overlapping also helps create depth. So here's my middle ground up on the picture plane and smaller. Background, notice that my trees in the background are even smaller, and you are beginning to see the tops of those because they are visually smaller in the background. So I started off foreground, middle ground, and the background. And that creates visual depth using size, a little bit of color, and a little bit of overlapping. That all helps to create foreground, middle ground, background, and visual depth. So here's another way that you can do that. Using almost a triangle, perspective triangle. Let's start off with these people up here. I just drew a triangle and drew some lines. Notice that the lines are closer together here than down near the bottom. This also helps because, again, as they get closer to you, the wood in my deck or whatever this is going to be larger as it's closer to you and smaller as it gets further away. That also helps create the illusion of depth, and that it gets smaller this way. 1 point perspective. So I'm going to start off, and I'm going to start with my biggest figure at the bottom of the picture plane, and she's pretty big. Then I've got my middle ground here with my girl there, and she's about half her size, right? So she appears behind her. And then I've got my very last little figure, and see, she's much smaller than these people. And I'm going to put her right there. So it appears that I have, instead of having all three people like just short people, that looks a little funny, doesn't it? But if I move her up on the plane, she looks more normal because she is behind. She now is behind this lady, and this lady is behind the rest of them. And all I did was create a triangle, draw some lines, and cut out some pictures. So I would love for you to try, either by drawing the trees or cutting out some pictures and seeing if you can create foreground, middle ground, and background. This is your challenge. You do not have to do it exactly how I do it. You may choose to do it with something that you really like to draw, and that will be great. I can't wait to see how you use foreground, middle ground, and background.